What does it mean for a franchise to get its house in order? It means making the uncomfortable decisions early, paying your best players before someone else does, and building the kind of organizational stability that turns a 7-9 team into a genuine contender. The Dallas Cowboys just took a significant step in that direction. And if you care about where this team is headed in 2026 and beyond, this is a conversation you need to be part of. Subscribe to Cowboys Reality Check if you haven't already, and let's get into it. The Dallas Cowboys have officially signed All-Pro kicker Brandon Aubrey to a 4-year, $28 million contract extension, making him the highest-paid kicker in the history of the National Football League. The deal includes $20 million in guaranteed money and was negotiated by his agents Todd France and A.J. Stevens of Athletes First. NFL Network insider Ian Rappaport broke the news first, and ESPN confirmed the details shortly after, noting that Aubrey's signing bonus comes in at $8.25 million. At $7 million per year on average, Aubrey becomes the first kicker in NFL history to earn that annual figure, surpassing the previous benchmark set by Houston Texans kicker Ka'imi Fairbairn, who had briefly held the record after signing his own extension earlier this offseason. To understand why this deal matters beyond the headline number, you have to understand how long this negotiation dragged on and how uncertain the outcome felt for much of the offseason. The Cowboys opened talks with Aubrey last summer during the 2025 season. Those discussions went nowhere. The Cowboys were offering close to $7 million per year, while Aubrey's representation, led by Todd France, was seeking approximately $10 million annually. That is not a small gap. That is a fundamental disagreement about market value, and it meant that as the offseason progressed and the calendar turned to 2026, there was no guarantee this deal would get done at all. In March, Dallas placed a second-round tender on Aubrey worth $5.76 million, which is the mechanism used for restricted free agents to retain their rights. This allowed Aubrey to negotiate with other teams, but gave Dallas the right of first refusal on any offer he received. If a team had signed him to an offer sheet and the Cowboys declined to match, that team would have owed Dallas a second-round pick as compensation. That made it a difficult proposition for any outside team to engage meaningfully in a bidding war. The restricted free agent window for offer sheets closed last Friday without any team submitting one, which meant Aubrey's rights were retained by Dallas for the 2026 season regardless of whether a new deal was signed. No team came forward with an offer sheet, and so the negotiation returned to where it had been all along. Two sides that both wanted a deal, separated by a meaningful financial gap. What changed is that both parties ultimately found middle ground. At $7 million per year, Aubrey's deal falls short of the $10 million annually he was reportedly seeking, but it still breaks new ground at the position and gives him security through the 2030 season. Head coach Brian Schottenheimer spoke to this dynamic with some directness during the negotiation period, making clear that Aubrey's desire to remain in Dallas was never in question. When you build the right culture here, the players want to stay, Schottenheimer said. The good thing for me, and for us in the Cowboys organization, is knowing that Brandon does not want to go anywhere. That sentiment matters, because in contract negotiations, mutual desire to reach a deal does not automatically produce one. What it does is keep both sides at the table long enough to get creative. In this case, the structure of the deal, with an $8.25 million signing bonus front-loading significant cash, likely gave Aubrey the financial certainty he was seeking even if the annual average landed below his initial target. Aubrey had previously told the team that he absolutely wanted to remain in Dallas, and this extension reflects that. That posture throughout the offseason suggested a player motivated by fair compensation, not by a desire to play elsewhere, and the resolution reflects that. Players who want to stay with a team generally find a way to do so. Players who are looking for an exit tend to find one. Now, let's look at what Aubrey has actually done on the field to earn this contract, because the numbers are worth examining carefully rather than just accepting the premise that he deserved it. Aubrey has connected on 112 of 127 field goal attempts over his 3 years with the Cowboys, including 35 of 44 on kicks of at least 50 yards. He is also tied for the fourth longest field goal in league history at 65 yards. That career line is remarkable for anyone, but it becomes even more striking when you consider the context of his long-range attempts. He owns the NFL record for the most career field goals of at least 60 yards, with 6. That is not a statistical quirk. That is a sustained demonstration of leg strength and technical precision that no other kicker in the history of the sport has matched. Breaking down his accuracy by year tells an important story. In 2023, his rookie season, Aubrey was nearly perfect. He was named a first-team All-Pro and earned a Pro Bowl selection in what became one of the most efficient debut seasons a kicker has ever produced. In 2024, his performance dipped slightly from that elite standard but remained excellent by any reasonable measure. In 2025, his conversion rate on 50-plus yard attempts was 11 of 17, a figure that looks modest on the surface but requires context. The Cowboys were increasingly willing to attempt kicks that most organizations would not ask of their kickers. The range that Aubrey has demonstrated means Dallas operates with a different set of fourth down and field position calculations than the rest of the league. Schottenheimer has referred to Aubrey as a literal weapon, and that framing is analytically accurate. In an era where field position and scoring efficiency have become central to how teams are constructed, having a kicker who can convert from 60-plus yards consistently changes the calculus of what it means to be in field goal range. Opposing defenses cannot simply prevent Dallas from driving to the 40-yard line and then allow a punt. Aubrey's presence means that midfield is effectively scoring territory. He has been selected to the Pro Bowl in all 3 of his NFL seasons while earning All-Pro honors each year, including a first-team selection in his rookie campaign. 3 consecutive Pro Bowl selections at the kicker position is genuinely rare. The position is often treated as an afterthought in discussions of team construction, but when a team has the best player in the world at that spot, it becomes a tangible competitive advantage. The previous standard at the position that this contract displaced was set by Harrison Butker of the Kansas City Chiefs, who signed a 4-year, $25.6 million deal with $17.75 million guaranteed. Aubrey's new contract surpasses that by nearly $2.4 million in total value and beats the guaranteed figure by more than $2 million. Ka'imi Fairbairn of the Houston Texans had briefly held the record for highest average annual salary at a kicker at $6.5 million, a mark that Aubrey's $7 million average now supersedes. The hierarchy is clear. Aubrey is not just the highest-paid kicker in the league. He is the highest-paid kicker the league has ever produced, and the market now reflects that consensus. It is worth pausing on Aubrey's biographical arc for a moment, because it is genuinely unusual and adds a layer of appreciation to what he has built. Before joining the Cowboys, Aubrey played in the USFL with the Birmingham Stallions and previously pursued a professional soccer career after playing collegiately at the University of Notre Dame. He was a first-round pick of Toronto FC in Major League Soccer in 2017 after starring for Notre Dame soccer team, and he had never kicked competitively in a football context until joining the Stallions. The story of his wife watching a Cowboys game and encouraging him to pursue kicking has been told repeatedly, but it never loses its resonance because the outcome is objectively extraordinary. A player who had no competitive football kicking experience became, within 3 years of entering the NFL, the highest-paid kicker in the history of the sport. Aubrey now joins quarterback Dak Prescott, also a Todd France client, as the highest-paid player at his respective position in the NFL. France has now negotiated contracts for the highest-paid quarterback and the highest-paid kicker in football, both of them on the same team. That is an unusual distinction and speaks to the leverage that comes from having 2 elite clients on one roster. It also means the Cowboys front office has committed significant resources to their special teams operation, which represents a deliberate philosophical statement about how they want to build this team. From a cap perspective, the structure of this deal deserves some analysis. Prior to this extension, the Cowboys carried approximately $14.4 million in salary cap space for 2026 and a projected $10.4 million in space for 2027. The $8.25 million signing bonus will be prorated across the life of the deal, which means the immediate 2026 cap hit is manageable. Kicker contracts, by the nature of the position salary scale, do not carry the same immediate cap burden as deals at skill positions, so Dallas has not fundamentally altered its offseason flexibility by completing this extension. What it has done is remove one of the offseason uncertainties from the board and allow the front office to shift its attention elsewhere. Which brings us to the central question that now defines the Cowboys' offseason. What happens with George Pickens? Back in February, the Dallas Cowboys placed the non-exclusive franchise tag on Pro Bowl wide receiver George Pickens, securing his rights for the 2026 season. The two sides have until July 15th to work out a new contract, or Pickens must play the 2026 season on a one-year deal worth $27.298 million. That is the hard deadline, and everything between now and mid-July will be shaped by how seriously both sides engage with the possibility of a long-term extension. The stakes of this negotiation are considerable. Pickens landed in Dallas via a blockbuster trade with the Pittsburgh Steelers following the 2025 draft. With Dak Prescott at the helm, CeeDee Lamb on the field, and a capable rushing attack through Javonte Williams, Schottenheimer helped orchestrate Pickens' first-ever 1,400-yard season, which also included a career-high 9 touchdowns and the first Pro Bowl and All-Pro selection of his career. That is the kind of production that commands top-of-market money, and Pickens and his representation know it. Spotrac projects Pickens' market value at $30.6 million per year, suggesting a 4-year contract worth approximately $122 million. Some observers believe he may be aiming even higher, seeking compensation on par with CeeDee Lamb's $34 million annual average. The Cowboys, meanwhile, have shown no urgency to accelerate those negotiations. Jerry Jones has acknowledged publicly that the organization has long-term plans for Pickens, but has been deliberately vague about the timeline for getting a deal done. "I don't know," Jones said when asked about the possibility of an extension before July 15th. "The franchise tag has an automatic time frame on it, and all of us will be working within the time frame of the conditions of the franchise tag. It should play itself out." That is not the language of an organization rushing to close a deal. It is the language of a front office that is comfortable letting the process unfold at its own pace, confident that their leverage, the franchise tag itself, the July 15th deadline, and Pickens' apparent desire to remain in Dallas, keeps them in a favorable negotiating position. A longtime NFL contract negotiator speaking to the press suggested that Jones doesn't subscribe to the idea of carrying two receivers on mega contracts alongside a top-paid quarterback simultaneously. That is a meaningful data point. It implies the Cowboys may push back hard on any Pickens ask that approaches Lamb's $34 million annual figure. With Aubrey's offer sheet deadline having passed without incident, Pickens is clearly the next major contract conversation. Dak Prescott confirmed at a recent public appearance that Pickens is in good spirits and that the two have worked out together this offseason. That is at least a signal that the relationship between Pickens and his teammates remains intact despite the contractual uncertainty. There has been ongoing discussion about whether Pickens will report to the team's voluntary offseason program. The Cowboys are currently approaching the franchise tag as their working offer, without active extension talks happening in parallel. This posture from both sides mirrors the early stages of many Cowboys contract situations. Prescott himself played on the franchise tag in 2020, broke his ankle during that season, and still received a record-breaking contract the following year. Stephen Jones described Pickens as an elite receiver and credited his contributions to some of the best offense the franchise has played in recent memory. When an executive uses that language publicly, it is typically not a precursor to letting that player walk. Pickens himself has spoken carefully in public. In an Instagram video that surfaced recently, Pickens appeared on vacation, relaxed and unconcerned, and said at the end of the clip, "Definitely year 5 going to be another movie." It is not a signed contract, but it is a clear enough signal that Pickens intends to be on the field in 2026. The question is which uniform he will be wearing, and whether the Cowboys can close the gap between their offer and his expectation before July 15th arrives. The Aubrey signing provides an important backdrop for that negotiation. First, it clears one item off the offseason checklist and allows the front office to focus organizational bandwidth on the Pickens situation. Second, It demonstrates that the Cowboys are willing to pay market rate, and in fact, set the market rate for players they value. That willingness to pay at the top of the market is something Pickens' camp will note. The 2026 NFL Draft is days away, and Dallas enters it with 2 first-round picks following the Micah Parsons trade to Green Bay. Those picks represent significant organizational capital and will shape the roster for years to come. But the Pickens negotiation runs parallel to the draft process and will not wait for it. The July 15th deadline is real, and both sides understand what it means to approach it without a deal in place. For the Cowboys, the risk is a second consecutive franchise tag year, which would force a different financial calculation and potentially damage the relationship with a player they clearly want to keep. For Pickens, the risk is leaving guaranteed money on the table if he holds out and misses regular season games, a path that has historically not worked out well for players who have tried it. The most likely outcome, based on how these situations tend to resolve and based on the signals coming from both sides, is an extension that lands somewhere in the $30 to $32 million per year range, above Spotrac projection, below what Lamb earns, and structured in a way that keeps Dallas's cap workable alongside Prescott's deal and Lamb's existing contract. That outcome is not guaranteed, but it is the path of least resistance for both parties, and the Aubrey signing signals that the Cowboys are in a deal-making posture this offseason. There's a larger organizational narrative taking shape here worth recognizing. The Cowboys finished 2025 at 7-9, missed the playoffs for a second consecutive year, traded away their best defensive player in Micah Parsons, and entered this offseason with significant questions at multiple positions. The defensive rebuild under new coordinator Christian Parker is underway. The Rashawn Gary trade brought in a legitimate edge rusher. The draft will address multiple roster needs. And now, with Aubrey locked in and the Pickens conversation fully in focus, Dallas is methodically working through its offseason priorities in the correct sequence. The Brandon Aubrey contract is the right move at the right time. It is a 4-year commitment to the best kicker in the league, structured at a number that breaks records without crippling the cap, completed before the draft weekend, so the front office can shift its attention to the more complex negotiations ahead. The Cowboys now turn to George Pickens with Aubrey resolved, the draft approaching, and the July 15th deadline giving the negotiation a shape and a structure. That is where the story goes next. We want to know what you think about the Aubrey extension. Grade the deal in the comments. A, B, C, D, or F, and tell us what you think it means for the Pickens negotiation. I'm Nick Andrews, and this is Cowboys Reality Check.